started. Atikant, formally, welcome to
Thank
Reuben's
you.
podcast. Thank you for
Thank you.
making
Thank
time
you.
to be here. You are in Gurgaon right now. How
Yes.
long have you been living in Gurgaon?
About 3 years. About three
Hmm.
years. Basically, before COVID, I moved in.
Oh, you moved
Uh,
in just before COVID.
yeah. Actually, during COVID, somewhere in between, I used to live with a bunch of people and everybody abandoned and fled home. So then I had to leave my flat and then I was about to marry Harman, who's
Yes,
somebody else we went to college with.
correct.
So we anyway had plans to move here. So then I moved here, and then he moved in, and then COVID, COVID happened.
Nice. And you always lived in Delhi. You're from Delhi. You've grown up.
No,
Oh
no.
no.
I'm from Patna.
Oh,
That's
you're
where I
from
was.
Patna.
Yeah.
And
So
then you moved to
until
Delhi just for college.
yes, yeah.
I see. And how has
Yeah.
Gurgaon life been for you so far?
It's good. I work from home, so I'm mostly homebound. This is my workstation, so this is where I'm at. But Gurgaon is good. It's a little more organized than Delhi, so that
Hmm.
helps. But it's still Delhi in some ways, so that
What does
that
that
has its
mean?
pluses and minuses.
What are the minuses?
You can't remove the people from Delhi in that sense.
Hmm.
Like the place is great, but yeah, it can be a little challenging. But I feel
Hmm.
the people I've met in Gurgaon are still. I see myself being able to connect with them a little better than probably core Delhi
I see.
type of a crowd. But
Why do you think that's the case? Is it because they're younger or they just work in different industries?
yeah, I think working in different industries helps.
Hmm.
Use similar mindsets. I guess most people are first generation migrants, so to speak, like people who move
Yeah.
there for work or for studies or whatever. So
Yeah.
you have similar challenges and things as opposed to Delhi, where it's a mixed bag, and you've
Yeah.
had people who've been there for generations, and that your life's quite different. You
Hmm.
can't help it.
Yeah. Well, I lived in Delhi for how many years now? I mean, Gurgaon. Not for
Hmm.
to be clear to the Delhi eyes, we did not. I did not live in Delhi. I lived in Gurgaon for I think starting 2013 to 2018. So I think a good 4.5 5
Oh
years.
wow!
This time I
And
went back.
hmm.
And I was there like maybe in Gurgaon maybe 3 4 months ago. And man, I went to one of these bars at DLF 5. I kid you not. I think it makes Singapore bars look like random.
Really?
Yeah, like the one on the two horizon or one horizon, one of those fancy
Whiskey
buildings.
Samba? Yeah.
One of those, yeah. Because
Yeah.
when we moved to Gurgaon, one horizon was not even constructed. Like they were still like
Oh.
building it up. So it was only towards our tail end that that finally got completed and things were opening up. So actually, when we moved to Gurgaon, Cyber Hub was not there. My God, I sound like a 70-year-old, but
No, it wasn't because I remember what. So sorry to interrupt you, but basically, I think Nadeem used to take me out of North Campus because I was still in law school. So he was my one connect to civilization. So
yeah,
he would drive me to Gurgaon, and then I remember quite categorically when Sai Baba was constructed, he took like this simple turn he took to Sai Baba. He's like, "Ye dekho, diware, glass."
yeah, it was crazy. Because anyway, from Res to Delhi to move to Gurgaon, you're like, oh my God, like it is called Cyber City. Like how futuristic can it get, right? It's called Cyber City, and we're like, oh my God, look at this big office. And just like few months later, the Cyber Hub opens up. You're like,
Hmm.
my God. And I remember we actually work in consulting, so we used to have like if you work late, which half the week you were, you would get like 500 rupees in cash to go and buy anything you want. And you would go and be like, my God, look at all these new options to open up. Um, they were so expensive that some like most of the days you wouldn't get it within 500, which is absolutely crazy. But anyway, so that was Gurgaon, and then yeah, very recently it's just been getting better and better and better. I don't know if it's like still considered unsafe a place. Do you think that's the case?
I think it is. I think all of Delhi is, and there's
Oh,
no
okay.
escaping. But I think you just become a little tone deaf
Mm,
to that over
I
time.
see.
Like I think just have been in Delhi for so long now
Mm,
that it's muscle memory, right? Like knowing how to
yeah,
protect yourself, which is a very messed up way to be,
yeah,
but it's what you do to sort of make your life easier. But
yeah.
yeah, but when you do step out or you go to other countries or cities,
Mm,
that's when you can feel the difference of, oh wait, I don't have to think about
yeah.
if somebody's following me. But yeah,
Correct.
it's not really as bad. But
Yeah.
it is definitely it's because it's the people, right? And it's
Hmm.
people everywhere, and it's a little
I see.
fucked up. Yeah.
So
But
three
you're in
years.
Singapore now, so
I
that's
mean,
cool.
I'm in Singapore, and this is like the opposite of any muscle memory might have built in my life. It's like dying every single day. I mean, Singapore is super safe, and I'm very grateful to be here. But yeah, like this is just not how the world works, right? I like people sometimes in Singapore. There's this concept called to chope, CHOPE, to chope a place. So when you go to eat out, you put some stuff on the table, and then you go
Yeah.
and order so that nobody sits there.
Tissues, right? Tissues
Yes,
in
tissues is like the
Singapore.
most common side. Like a typical side of a Singapore, like a hawker center, is a
Hmm.
bunch of tables, all of them empty, a super long queue, and all of them have like tissues on top of those tables.
Hmm.
So when I go, I don't carry tissues and all, so I'll just leave my wallet or just leave my phone there, and I'm like, who's going to take it? But even some Singaporeans will be like, oh, can you leave your wallet there? And I'm like, do you think somebody's going to take it? They're like, no, nobody's going to take it. Yeah, okay, you can leave it there. So it is that safe. But oh man, sometimes when I come back to India, I catch myself like, Reuben, what are you doing? Like, you can't just leave your thing there, or not your wallet, but anything of meaning, right? You just can't leave it
Yeah.
there. So yeah, I'm a hot target in India.
In India.
But
Nice.
yeah, but yeah, hopefully some of the muscle memory stays.
Yeah.
But anyway, okay, so 3 years in Gurgaon. Do you see yourself for the next maybe like 5 7 years? Is Gurgaon going to be home for you or?
Yeah, I think because of my work and
Hmm.
being a lawyer in India, I can't translate the law to any other jurisdiction. So it has to
Hmm.
be somewhere in India at some
I
point.
see.
I can always work remote. So like if
Yeah.
say for example Harman's work takes him somewhere,
Yeah.
then I may have to go. But yeah, I think even then, so if I can manage work,
Hmm.
that's totally doable. But yeah, I think geographically I'm constrained to India or Indian
Got it.
markets
Got it.
unless I plan to restart my career, which I'm too exhausted at this point to do.
Well, I think Indian markets in the space you're in seem to be doing pretty well. We'll talk about that in a bit. So, but before we get in, maybe a rundown
Hmm.
on what Atikant has been up to in the last 10 years. So, Atik and I studied together at university. Atikant studied history at Stephens from 2010 to 2013. After that, you moved to Law Fac. You spent 5 years. Is it five
Three,
years?
three,
Three
three, three
years.
years.
You spent 3 years at Law Fac, which was an interesting experience. And you said that on the pod as well as in your voice note. So I'm very keen to know what the hell happened at LawFac. And then you've been working in the world of like law ever since. And I think more specifically, you've been working with startups, VCs, Ps, or more on like is it called transaction? On the
Yes,
transaction side
yes.
of things, yeah, I was reading your bio on your website, and she was like, Adhikant is something about transaction side of things, and she's so good at this. And why do they call you AK-47? Is it because
Yeah,
you're
they can't pronounce my name, and
Atikant? How hard is it?
because it's not a usual name for anybody,
Okay.
and so they wanted something a little easier to. So
I see.
they used to call me AK-47,
Wow. Well,
or they used to call me Rajnikant. So that was that. AK, I'll take a AK-47. I think
yeah,
that's better.
very effective weapon, the AK-47. So is Adhikant. So she's been doing that for almost ever since she's graduated. That's about almost 7 8 years now. And yeah, in today's conversation, we're going to be talking about a lot about that. We'll start off, I think, maybe before we get to the juicy stuff at LawFac, maybe a good place to start is you spent 3 years at Stephens. Uh, your first time in Delhi,
Yes.
moving from Patna. What was your favorite memory from your time at Stephens?
Favorite memory, I think. I mean, two categories of memories. I would think one is,
Yeah.
of course, as in the friends I made and the stuff
Hmm.
we did, and it was mostly like I used to live with Aishwarya, who's also been on your podcast. So
Yes.
Aishwarya and I lived together through all of college. So with her at our PG and never making it to class, and just either being too drunk or generally just too lazy to make it to class. And and I was very nerdy in school. So for me, this was freedom. And the first thing I chose to do with that freedom was to not go to class and sleep instead. But as well,
Yeah.
low-lying goals. But yeah, so within 6 months, my parents got a letter from Thampu saying your daughter is not making it to class.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh my! But were you
yeah,
in
yeah.
res?
No, I wasn't, but somehow the letters went to a bunch of people.
What the hell?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think it went to Shweta's house as well. I don't know, but yeah, they were very very scared. They thought, "Guy, हमारी बेटी हाथ से
Oh
निकल
my God!
गई."
She's just left home 6 months, and look at
Yeah,
this what's happening. The principal is sending us a letter.
yeah, yeah. And I was someone this kind of stuff would never happen to in school because I was like very.
Yeah.
I won't say I was innocent, but I was definitely like a rule follower for
I won't
sure.
say I was innocent.
We'll come to that as well.
Sound
So
like a
yeah.
true lawyer. I wouldn't say I was innocent, but I followed all the rules.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that was one great memory, I think, generally. Just having that freedom for once.
Yeah.
And second was, of course, meeting Harman because I ended up marrying
Mm.
him. So definitely an important milestone there. But that was also some ride. But we can get to that
Yeah.
also.
Before we got it, I'm actually curious to know when your parents called you after they got the letter. Like, what was that? What was that conversation like?
They were like, we got this letter, and I did not know there was a letter
Yeah.
going home. So, and I was always very good at, for lack of a better word, lying to my parents and getting away
Correct.
with it. So, I was just playing it cool, and of course, the letter was right in front of them, so there was no hiding from it. They were ready to book their flight and come to Delhi to meet Thampu and sit down with him and discuss my future or some shit.
My God.
Thankfully, I walked them off of that ledge, but yeah, after that, I had to start attending classes. So I guess whatever
Oh.
Thampu did, it worked. So
And then now he'll claim,
I
like,
got my shit together.
look at how successful Atikant has been ever
It's
since.
all
That
thanks
that
to Thampu.
that was thanks to that letter. My God.
Yeah.
What do you remember your first act of freedom after you moved to college? What was that like? One thing you did, you were like, oh my God, let me seize this freedom I
Seize
have
this
now.
moment. Oh, so I think there were lots of acts of freedom. There were plenty of acts of freedom in Patna also,
Okay.
leading what I would like to call a double life in Patna, which we can I can explain a little bit more of. But in college there were lots. I think it was generally just being able to drink and walk
Mm.
at night alone. That was small freedoms, but. I remember this one time we used to remember we used to have those rafting trips.
Yes.
So I think I just started dating Harman, like it had barely been a week or something, and he was in that hiking club, right?
Correct.
And they used to set that up. So we went with them, and Maju was there, by the way. And this is Maju before he realized he's cool. So he was a very shy, sweet guy. Okay, so
Yeah.
I remember we went there, and I don't know if you know this about Rishikesh because of course it's a pilgrimage town, so
Yes.
they're a little more strict about where you can find alcohol
Yeah.
and those rafting areas or whatever. Those campsites are usually in the middle of nowhere, so it's not
Yeah.
like there are shops all around you. And of course, as kids, we wanted to drink, and there was nothing to do, get alcohol from. But so Harman and I thought, we are the ones who are going to bring the party. So at
Wow.
8 p.m. or something, we decided to somehow take some taxi and go into town and buy alcohol, which was easy enough. We did it. We found like some local cab guy. He took us there. When we reached there, we realized uh, liquor shops there shut at I don't know 9 or something, and
Oh
then
no.
and we were stuck and we couldn't find a way back because highways were shut. And this is not even Rishikesh. I don't even know what town this was. You know those old school liquor shops where you have like
The
cages in
jail.
front.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then you have to
The
sort of
jail.
put your hand through, and there's this hope there's some alcohol at the end
Yeah.
of that. Yeah, that shit.
I can only imagine what happened before those cages were introduced. Like, what must have happened in those shops that they're like, we are going to make this look like a prison, and there's going to be alcohol inside, and then like small halls you can go and get in.
Yeah, and a
But sorry,
universal thing, so everybody
yeah,
believes that
everywhere.
there's
Oh
some
my god.
real issue. So we did that, and then we found some local guy, and Maju was with us, and he was shitting his pants by then because it was nobody was there, and he was scared, and I don't know where I got the confidence from to not be scared also, but yeah, there was not the sort of people you want to be around because
Yeah.
everybody was staring at us. We definitely did not look like we belonged, and we were children. I don't think we were older than
Yeah.
19. Then we found some auto, those big autos,
Yeah.
Vikrams. So we found one of those, gave him an obscene amount of money, whatever little we had, to take us somewhere. And then he
This was
took
all
us
the
to
alcohol
some.
money, yeah, which we did not buy
Yeah.
the alcohol with.
No, but then we were committed. We told him to first take us to a liquor store because we're like, itne dur hai, so we have to at least get it. Then we found some other shady liquor store, and all we got was, I don't know, what was the Royal
Country
Stag
liquor.
category of,
Oh,
yeah, that kind of shit. So then we got it.
okay.
We were happy. We're like, we've achieved something. And
Yeah.
then the cab guy left us on the highway somewhere. He said, "You guys figure it out. I can't go beyond this. The cops will stop me."
Mm.
So those winding roads on hills. We were just
Correct.
walking on it,
Oh my
and it
God.
was pitch black. And we finally found some truck to hitchhike. To hitchhike on and get us to our campsite. And that guy was drunk, and
Of
Maju
course.
was, I think, almost ready to cry at that point. But we made it. And when we did, we thought we're going to be the heroes of this campsite, and everybody's going to sort of be very happy that we got all the alcohol. But we reached there, and we were, of course, in first year. So all the
Yeah.
third year seniors who were like gods at that point, they were pissed off because they thought we'd run away or
Oh
gotten
my
lost, because
God.
no, none of us had network also.
Correct.
So then, so basically we got back and we got an earful, and Harman had to sleep, and Harman and Maju had to sleep on a mattress outside on the beach side as a punishment. and then
Oh my
and then yeah,
God.
and I got to sleep in a tent alone, so I was fine. But yeah, the double
Well,
standards help sometimes. But yeah.
that surely is a good example of seizing the freedom. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would not have the balls to do any of that. I think I did one of the rafting trips. And yeah, it does get damn cold at night.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
so oh my God. Okay, so seizing freedom, or living your dual partner life,
Yeah.
and then meeting Harman, of course. You guys have been dating ever since. So you all got married last year, 2 years ago.
2 years back, so we weren't together for a while. We got
Okay.
back together like 4 years back.
Ah, I
Yeah.
see. I see.
So about 4 5 years we weren't in touch,
I see.
and hated each other's guts, and then somehow
Well,
realized we hate other people a little bit more than each other.
okay,
Yeah.
nice. Okay, so those were the two sort of highlights from college. When you were studying history, did you like know that you were not going to do history beyond Stephens, or
No,
what
I
was that
thought
like?
up until right at the end that I was confused
Hmm.
because when I was in school, I thought I'd either study law, journalism, or history, pol science, that kind of a
I
thing.
see.
So, but then history worked out. So I
Hmm.
did that, and then I realized it's extremely tough because you have to actually read a lot and
Hmm.
write a lot, which was tougher than I thought it would be. But right till the end, I was pretty sure that I may just continue with the masters. I mean, I'd gotten into JNU and I was ready to start it, and then law fac happened. So I
Hmm.
thought maybe it's time to give that a shot, because that law was always at the back of my mind.
Yeah.
Where I thought that could be something I'd want to do.
Well, what
Um,
about law like excited you at that point of time?
I think I had a very I mean, I had a very stereotypical idea of what the law would be, in the sense
Hmm.
that I loved the Constitution when I was studying it in school, and I thought, wow, what a document, like the we have a great understanding of what the basis of this, like it was all very delusional, but it was a pure thought in that sense. Like I love the
Yeah.
idea that you could write something that could stand the test of time and dictate principles of how things are supposed to be, and that's sacrosanct. So the idea of creating a document that where you can't foresee all of the ways in which it'll play itself out, but you have
Hmm.
some version of a foresight to be able to draft something like that,
Hmm.
where you think that, okay, even though the facts may change, like from 1940s to now, cyber city, etc., right? Like
Yeah.
worlds change completely, but then the rules have to be drafted in a way that they can still apply in some
Hmm.
sense. So understanding those core truths, and then being able to put that down and interpreting it year on year, uh, to make sure that it sort of evolves with you as a
Hmm.
society. That seemed like a very interesting thing to think about. or to
Mm.
be part of, or to be the person sitting down to understand how it has evolved and how do you change the meaning of or interpret something a little differently. That
Mm.
interpretation thing was also quite similar in history as well, like in terms of you're presented with something and the same thing can be viewed in a million different ways by different historians who all come from different points of view because they all have their own separate biases, good
Yeah.
or bad. And then it's up to you to decide which side appeals to you the most, or which side do you think you can stands on
Mm.
firmer ground. So that whole not argument, but in the sense of that thought process forming situation where you have to sort of think through something analytically and logically and arrive at a conclusion. And
Mm.
it's all based on biases. It's all based on different types of prejudices or your own points of view. That always seemed pretty interesting to me.
Wow. I mean, was it this clear to you, like
No,
in,
like it's
in
only
11th
something I can
standard?
tell in hindsight. No, this is just something like back in school, it just seemed like I loved political science. I loved reading about what happened. I was always very
Yeah.
interested in politics as a kid. So it just seemed like something that appealed to me naturally. So the closest
Yeah.
that came to that was law because I would never see myself in something as real as politics. So then
Yeah.
this seemed like a adjacent activity
Mm.
uh, that I could attack as a profession, and I knew how to get to it, as
Mm.
opposed to something that's very, very ad hoc or there are no rules to it, like
Yeah.
politics, for example. So at that time, I don't think, of course, I had the foresight to it, but now when I see, I feel like that was one common thread.
Yeah. That is so fascinating, right? Like the way you describe that the document, like a piece of paper written 70 years ago, is still sort of so, like, I won't even say relevant. Like relevant is an understatement, but at the
Yeah,
core of how everything happens,
yeah,
uh,
yeah.
wow. I never even imagined, like, let alone class 11 or 12. Like, it was like, we are, we the people, or something, 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 something.
Hmm.
And I'm like, you take it for granted, but,
Yeah, and you
um,
do, right? And that's why we are probably where we are right now
yeah.
in India. Yeah, yeah.
What do you mean by that? Talk to me more about what do you mean by where we are in
No, in
India?
the sense that as I wouldn't say we, but a majority of the people who represent us believe that,
Mm.
that document or the principles on which it was based is not true or is not us or doesn't represent India, and that's the flaw in their argument, I would think, right?
Mm.
Because that's the premise on the basis of which we were created, and
Mm-hmm.
it's not perfect, it's not great, but it's always meant to be an ideal to live up to,
Yeah.
and therefore in the process make improvements, right? Like
Mm.
whatever you do in life, you have certain goals in mind, and then it's often
Yeah.
about your growth in that journey, as opposed to you may not even ever reach that proverbial
Yeah.
perfect world that you wanted to create, but it's the journey and the attempt you make along the way to make sure you
Mm.
espouse to secularism. You make sure you try to get to a sense of equality or inequality
Yeah.
amongst the equals, right? Like that kind of thing. But I guess
Mm. I'm
it's
gonna
a
ask you a
yeah.
I'm gonna ask you a very nerdy question, and you can.
Hmm.
My guess is that you might have an answer, but there's a very slim chance. Is there a in the Constitution? Do you have a favorite part of the Constitution?
I think just the preamble where it says we're secular, because
Yeah.
that's the big one,
Mm.
which is most controversial. I don't know how that is something that is up for debate now. It's just quite
I've
crazy.
not been following like Indian politics a lot, but is India being secular up for negotiation now, or
Yeah,
like
yeah, there were some comments thrown around that we will remove the term secular from the preamble,
hmm,
because that is not a core part of the constitution, is the
I
argument that
see,
was being made. So when you do that, so it's not just semantics. It's not that okay, word nikal diya, what's gonna happen.
correct,
How it plays itself out is that when things come up before courts for debate, and the
yeah,
courts have to decide something, they can't just decide on the basis of what they think is right or wrong. They have to back it up with what the law says.
yeah,
So if, for example, I mean, this could be a very exaggerated example, and I'm not a litigating lawyer, so I could be very
yeah,
wrong also. this. But say, for example, there's an issue around more favorable treatment to one
Hmm.
community over another, and there's a very real case that comes up, and the principle behind the case is that question.
Yeah.
It could be a very simple dispute between you and me, but
Yeah.
it turns into a constitutional question. But if by then the law has moved so much that things like these are not guaranteed by law anymore,
Hmm.
though that's a very extreme example, because it will take
Yeah.
a long time to move the needle on the legislature to remove certain things from the constitution. But you
I
never know,
see.
like things are just beyond imagination at this point anyway.
Yeah.
But so when you do that, it's possible that it's harder for a judge, as much as morally he may side with you, for him to be able to rule
Correct.
in your favor or to uphold those principles if the law doesn't let him
Support
do
it.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, fascinating. Okay, we will come back to talking about the law because I have so many questions. I don't have too many lawyer
Hmm.
friends, but we'll come back to it.
Hmm.
But let's talk about your first experience in like law. Like you joined Law Fact in 2013. You were
Yeah.
there till 2016, 3
16. Yeah.
years. Why was it an interesting experience
Yeah. Yeah.
for you?
Yeah.
Why was it a reality check?
Cause so I came from Patna, which was anyway a very sheltered, small town, in the sense of those state capital,
Yeah,
not very developed. It was quite unsafe, so we were all mostly home, and you were chaperoned everywhere, that kind of a thing. Less
yeah.
because it was conservative, more because it was a matter of safety for a few years at least, when I was growing up.
Okay.
To Stephens, which was again, in some ways, it was a world in itself, right? Like if you
Yeah,
just existed within Stephens, it was not a representation of what was happening just outside the walls, right?
yeah.
Like we were all a little too idealistic in some ways, and it was great for growth and for learning and all of that, but you miss out on some good reality checks that people who are not as polished, people who are not as nice or politically correct
Hmm.
can be like, and how do you deal with something like that. So then I did not know what I was getting into when I went to law fact. And then it was DU politics and like legit student politics, not in a nice JNU kind of a way, but dirty, dirty politics, right? Where
Hmm.
I saw like I think we were in class, and they were campaigning for elections, and ABVP, NSUI, and I think AAP had just started their own student party. Some two, three dudes got into a fight, and then it was 20 men chasing each other through college halls while we're having classes, and they have like sticks in their hand, and they're trying to beat up each other, and none of them look like students. They all look like 40-year-olds, and or people who had ever otherwise seen in class. But I think generally, yeah, the world gets real very, very fast when you're in law fact. So I was grateful for that experience, because if you do litigation, it's quite similar in the sense that you're dealing with people from all walks of life, and not everyone's had as sanitized an upbringing or world
Hmm.
that they exist in as you. And people have much more real issues in life as well. So it's a good starter to seeing what the world is like when you have to exist on your own, and you're not, your world doesn't is not limited to working in a corporate park, and like,
Yeah.
or everybody looks like you and talks like you, and your world just starts and ends there. uh, so in that sense, it was different, a little scary, but it was good.
Hmm.
Simple things like not being able to find enough people you can just simply talk to and genuinely be friends with, as opposed to just survive because you have to be there, because you just don't have enough in common with people to be able to connect with them on.
Yeah.
But then still being able to then eventually come around and see that, okay, wait, we may sound different, look different, have different interests, but there's still something to talk about.
Hmm.
So that was good, interesting.
Hmm.
And yeah,
Apart
horrible.
from, yeah,
Yeah, just
sorry.
bad teachers, no
Hmm.
classes, and no support to like get jobs, etc. So it was
Hmm.
those type of real issues also, but overall it toughens you up, I think. It toughened me up.
So apart from the reality check and being like toughened up from a pure academic and from a learning point of view, like, do you think, because sometimes I do hear like people who study beyond Stephens, they're like, academically Stephens wasn't very rigorous. It
Hmm.
was very like, whatever basic. We never like taught to like think or
Hmm.
critically think and things like that. What I'm
Yeah.
hearing is law fac was even worse than that, or do you
Yeah,
think
yeah, yeah.
it
It
was
was
worse than
worse
that?
because they unfortunately didn't have enough resources to attract the right kind of faculty.
Hmm.
Due masters system has its own issues in terms of they don't give out, they at least at the time did not give out a lot of permanent positions to professors.
Hmm.
So there was not a lot of incentive for bright people to want to stick around and be there.
Hmm.
And that reflected in, how what was taught in classes or what
I
wasn't.
see.
So it was not that great, but I mean, and it did affect my life in the sense that for me, the immediate concern was that I need to work as hard as I can outside the classroom through internships, whatever, break into the right circles and try and get a job as fast as I can in the kind of work that I want to do. That was like a very, I had a very clear goal and I had to do it for very practical reasons. I had to start earning, I had to start my career. I couldn't just chill and figure it
Hmm.
out. I didn't have the liberty to do that. So
Hmm.
for me, it was a very real expectation of what I needed to. I understood very quickly I'm not going to get what I need from the classroom. So then I need to learn on the job and to get a job at the end of the day.
How soon
And
did you figure that out? Like you joined law fac in 2013. When
two
when did you?
months, two,
Two
3 months.
months
So
in.
internships are a very big part of law school
Yeah.
generally. And when you're doing a 5-year program, which is where you start law right out of school, it's still fine because your first couple of years you're doing like a general BA, and of course some law courses as well, but your core law subjects only start a little later.
Hmm.
So you have some time, but at law fac you just have those 3 years to make it count, and you have no support to get internships, no robust alumni network that can help you do what you want to do. Uh,
Hmm.
so so it was, and I didn't know any lawyers. There are no lawyers in my family or anything. So I just had to sort of figure it out on my own. Got some lucky breaks, I would say. Just found the right kind of people I could work with who could see potential in me
Hmm.
and took that time to train me. But in that sense, law fac was good. There was no requirement for attendance, so I could
Hmm.
work as long as I wanted on the side. So that's what I did, and very, very long hours. But I learned then. I learned on the job. I didn't learn much in classrooms, but then I learned on the job.
Hmm.
And it is a very theoretical subject to begin with, so it's not easy to learn on the job,
Yeah.
especially when you're competing with kids from much better law schools who've had a lot of opportunities to be able to get to where they are or where they want to be.
Hmm.
But yeah, all in all, good. I think it just taught me to be a little tougher,
Hmm.
which was good.
Yeah, I think that's a lesson which I think most of us got either 1 year after leaving or like 3, 4, 5 years after leaving Stephens. For us, I
Yeah,
think for me it was when I left Bain and I started like running Nivasa,
yeah.
wherein you had to interact and deal with like everybody, right? Anybody who's looking for a house, all kind of like landlords,
Hmm.
um, real estate brokers. That was like the biggest slap to the face. Being like nobody really cares about the Stephens and your degree. Like as
Yeah.
long as you can get shit done, people
Yeah.
care about it. If not, nobody cares.
Yeah.
And I think it's a very, very good lesson, to
Yeah.
learn. That is how the world operates.
Hmm.
Um, if you look back and, maybe if there's a young person listening to this, thinking about law, they're very inspired by the Constitution. What was the best way to, or like, what would you have done differently on this path of eventually maybe pursuing a career in law? Like, what do you think is a better way to get to where you are right now?
I think definitely go to a better law school. I don't want to shit on law fac so much, but I would just say that for your own academic fulfillment, go to a place that you think will actually teach you the subject, just so you can enjoy the subject for what it is, right? Like
Yeah.
mine ended up being a very practical goal because that's what I had to do. I couldn't afford to lose more years in studying some more because I just wanted to get going.
Hmm.
So if those 3 years were better spent somewhere else where it could have been a real understanding and studying of the law, that would have been a better
Hmm.
choice. So if you have the resources to do it, if you have the willpower to do it, I would say go somewhere where you're guaranteed to get a better theoretical understanding of the subject. It may not help you get a better job, that's fine, but at least those 3 years you would have really understood how to read the law, because that's the main gist of it. You can't possibly understand, it's not like a bunch of facts that you have to memorize. So all they do in law school is essentially teach you how to read the law with the
Hmm.
example of multiple types of laws, and that's the essence of teaching law.
Hmm.
That's all that it is. So if you don't understand the basics of that, you'll never really quite get it right.
Hmm. But what do you
Uh,
mean by how to read the law? Like, what does
so
that mean?
if you're like any layperson, somebody who's not a lawyer, the first thing you'll hear from them, or what you may also say, is that, oh, legal documents are so long-winded, or
Yeah.
laws I can't understand because I don't know why they write it in such a complicated manner, right? Like, why
Yes.
can't they just say, you can't do this, if you do this, I'll put you in jail for these many years, and just leave it at that, right? Like, why keep it so complicated?
Yes.
But when you study the law, they teach you that, okay, every pause, every sentence, every comma, or every choice of word is a very conscious choice, and everything has an interpretation in itself. So when you say should, it means this. If you mean would, if it means this. When you say may, the interpretation of the legislators, that okay, it's a soft obligation, not a hard obligation. Or when you use certain words, it has completely different implications, and you need that complication to be there, because like I said at the beginning, it's whatever you write in the law is drafted probably 20, 30 years back, and your system can't be set up to update itself every 10 years for changing facts. So it
Yeah.
has to be something that can be interpreted over time and still hold true with changing facts. And the law has to evolve with you, it can't be the other way around.
Hmm.
So to be able to understand why is it drafted that way and what are the various ways you can interpret it. So then, therefore, when writing down things, say in simple contract, right? Whatever simple contract that you have, the way it's drafted is for a very specific reason. And if you don't do it, there are 10 million examples of real life situations where if you didn't write it a certain way, it
Hmm.
ended up turning into a completely different thing when it played itself out.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
So it's just to the lawyer's job, therefore, whether it's in litigation or in the corporate side of things, is to put down something for you in paper that works for you and most accurately captures your
Hmm.
intention, the way you would want it to play itself out 10 years down the line when there is an issue and you want to go back and check, oh shit, what did I say in that contract? Because now I want to sue this guy, or he's done something wrong and I'm sure it's wrong, and he couldn't
Hmm.
shouldn't be able to do that because his contract said so and so. So basic premise is, if you don't understand why things are written in a certain way and there is value to it, and how to
Hmm.
understand that value and to how to understand those words,
Hmm.
it'll take you a long time to catch up on all of that when you're actually working. And then when you're, because every day you're reading a new law at work, okay,
Yeah.
or there's a new change and you have to understand it. So unless you've understood the history of that law, or the way certain laws or certain authorities like regulators, for example, or tax guys, or actual legislators writing different types of laws, unless you've understood how they see laws
Hmm.
historically in their own departments, you won't be able to understand the intention of the law today.
Hmm.
Okay, but I'm maybe sounding quite vague, but trying to
No,
not be
I think
too
I
theoretical.
see, I see the, because I like, as part of my job, I have to deal with contracts.
Hmm.
And yeah, like, I'm always very confused on why is this language so like weird. Like, why can't we just have normal language to say you can do this, you can do that, whatever, right?
Yeah.
But I think I do see, I do see why most things are not you can or cannot. It's never
Hmm.
you can, this is right or this is wrong, or you're allowed to this, you're not allowed to this. It's more like this is how we interpret, or this is what our take on this is.
Hmm.
And this is like official, even regulators, like sometimes, because we are a
Yeah.
regulated institution, there are laws from regulators, and when we want to do something, we will see, okay, this is what this line says, this is what we are trying to do, and it's very hard to like match those. But is anything we're trying to do going against anything what they are trying to like mean, right?
Hmm.
And to be honest, that's most of what like our compliance or government relations team will
Yeah.
advise us on. Um, but yeah,
Yeah.
I think if seen from that lens, it makes sense. But otherwise, if you're just trying to be like, okay, this paper tells me what I can and cannot do, then it is a
Hmm.
frustrating activity to negotiate things on on
Yeah.
that contract.
And it's not like those guys always right and we're the
Yeah,
only
nobody's
one
right.
who's
Yeah,
right.
as long as you can
Yeah,
justify yourself,
there are
and then
incorrectly drafted laws and regulations all the time. Like it's
yeah,
there are gaps in the way things are written down, especially in like newly evolving laws, right? Like fintech laws in India. There'll always be
yeah,
gaps, so there'll be some contradictory thing in one
mm,
law and then something in some other rule. That happens all the time. So it's not like
yeah,
they're working in some mysterious ways and you don't quite
yeah,
understand it. Very often they're just regular guys who don't really understand
yeah.
the space but have this job to draft it because the department said so. So
Draft it out.
yeah,
Yeah,
so
we need
it's
to regulate this. Write something to regulate
yeah,
this now.
regulators, yeah.
Like the regulators. Okay, so you essentially do mostly corporate and transaction law, and not
Yes.
litigation.
No.
Was it seeing the people running around law fact which made you sure that I do not want to do litigation? I want
So
to do
I
maybe
did
some other stuff.
litigation. I did litigation for about 6 months,
Okay,
and I realized very quickly that that's not for me. It's
why?
so it was very practical issues. One was that that you go to courts, your case may or may not come up. You spend 6 hours there. You may have stayed
Hmm.
up all night preparing for something the previous night. It doesn't even come up, or the other guy says my boss is some busy in some other court, so can I ask for like a continuance,
Oh,
basically a next date pass over you some shit. Okay, so I just couldn't get over those inefficiencies, and that's all that the law I mean litigation, I mean not all, but like that's a large part of it. You have to
yeah,
play that game, and you do also play that game to your advantage when you need to, but that's a
correct.
part of it. And there's a lot of not hierarchy, but there are a lot of these. There is an invisible hierarchy in the sense that okay, when you're starting out young, you can only do certain types of matters,
Hmm.
and you have to suck up to a lot of the right people who are these, men in their 50s who have
Hmm.
giant egos, and you have to sort of pander to them all the time to get the kind of work that they get. So they will, recommend some work to you. And I mean, every job has some version of this, but it just seemed way too heavily reliant on these type of intangibles, and that is not something I thought was my strong suit ever, to
Yeah.
be able to work the system in that sense. Like I work very good within set rules and set boundaries, and okay, I know this is the way to grow. Okay, I need to do this. I do my job well, and then it works itself out, and you learn
Yeah.
other things along the way. But there seem to be a lot of these miscellaneous things that took up a lot more time than I was willing to
Hmm.
give. Uh, Maybe if I'd stuck it out, I'm sure it would have worked out in some way. And I'm sure this is not everybody's experience.
Yeah.
But this was my experience being somebody who didn't know anybody in that area, and just
Hmm.
I didn't know how to navigate it.
Got
So
it.
I couldn't get a handle of it. So then I had also done some internships in transactions work. So even in litigation, I was doing commercial litigation. So that's still
Hmm.
connected to what I do.
Yeah.
So it seemed like if I just go a few steps before when the commercial dispute starts to the actual setting of the commercial
Hmm.
matter, maybe that's where it's at. And yeah, I started doing that, not fully understanding what I didn't grow up understanding what private equity was or venture
Yeah.
capital is, or like what are shares. Like, I didn't know any of this, right? And none of us do. It's just you do it long enough on the job, and then you pretend as you go, and eventually starts making sense. So that's kind of what happens. It was
Got it.
sort of accidental.
Got it. Interesting. So in your
Hmm.
current job, in your current firm, you guys work a lot with VCs, startups, Ps.
Yeah.
PE, for people who don't know, is private equity. VC is venture capital. The best way to think about it is when people start companies and they want to raise money. You need to get a lawyer involved because there's a lot around company ownership, how shares are issued, so on and so forth. Maybe question on this one is,
Hmm.
or let's maybe talk about a recent deal you've done. Maybe no
Hmm.
mentioning names,
Hmm.
but what do you sort of find the most exciting in working in this world of
Sure.
VCP. And
Hmm.
I'm actually very curious, and maybe if you could talk a little bit about, what does an average day for you look like? Like, what are you doing like the whole
On
day?
an
Are you just
average.
like
Yeah.
writing contracts or like reading contracts or fighting with other lawyers?
Yeah. No, so I'll explain the job is what the job of
Yeah,
a corporate lawyer, transaction lawyer typically is.
yeah,
So it's so one, like you said, of course, making sure the ownership is clean. So let's walk all of us through the life cycle of fundraising in that
yeah.
sense, or at least the moment that I get involved.
Correct.
So say we could either be representing the target company, that is, say, like the place where you work at, Ruben, if your
Yeah. So
company is
say
looking to
Ruben's
do a
company, or say
fundraise.
Ruben wants to raise some funds.
Okay,
I'm raising some money.
so Ruben is raising funds from, I don't know, Ever Capital, let's call
Okay,
it.
Ever
These
Capital.
usually these douchey names, usually, right?
Touche.
So it's yeah. So Ruben's company is raising funds from Ever Capital. I'm
Yeah.
representing Ruben,
Correct.
and my friend happens to represent Ever Capital.
Yeah.
So the moment that they'll get you guys will get us on board is say you realize that you need funds, you're not
Yes.
able to grow organically, or you
Yes.
need that extra infusion of cash. So
Yeah.
then you probably appoint a merchant bank or probably appoint an investment banker who'll go out
Yeah.
look at the market and see who has enough dry powder to put in money.
Yeah. But okay,
In
so let's say I've reached a point wherein I have a deal with this guy. They're going to put in $10 million for say 10% of my company. We have
hmm,
handshake. Theoretically, we're okay.
yeah.
What do I do? Like,
What
how do
happened?
you
Yeah.
guys? Yeah. What happens then?
So the first step is that you will sign a term sheet. In that
Hmm.
term sheet, we'll tell you'll say no, it's okay. I know the guy, I trust the
Yeah.
guy. It's okay. I figured it out. Don't worry, don't worry. We're like, no, hold it.
Yeah.
Let's sit down and think about some crucial things. When he says
Yeah.
10%, what is he looking for? Is he looking for operational rights? Is he looking for some key economic rights? Is he looking for some, more than 10% version of voting interest? So, is
Hmm.
he looking for some like more detailed veto rights? Does he want to have a say in certain critical matters, like
I see.
in terms of things which will affect you, in
Yeah.
the sense of how my business plan is made?
Yeah.
Am I okay with this guy being able to say yes or no to me? Can I be okay with this guy telling me that I can't give ESOPs to my top
Yeah.
whatever performers? Can this guy tell me that I can't sell my shares in this company for the next
Hmm.
5 years because he thinks that I need to stick around because he's put in money thinking that Ruben's gonna be running the show?
Yeah.
And is that a fair ask? It's my
Hmm.
job to tell you that what is standard and what is not standard in the context of the deal we're looking at. Say
Got it.
Ruben's company has been around for 10 years. It's a ship that runs on its own. It's not that it's a 1 year startup where it's essentially an idea and we're at
Yeah.
seed stage. And if Ruben leaves, there's nobody else who knows what to do.
Hmm.
If that's the situation, we're going to have a very different conversation where you're going
Correct.
to have a lot of personal liability to make sure that you're around. And if you are
Yeah.
around and you mess up for whatever reason, say you steal money or you are convicted for a crime or you're just not interested in the job,
Yeah.
how is it that your value in the company can be taken back by the company?
Hmm.
Because they need to bring that money back into the system so
Correct.
that they can give it to the next
Correct.
guy who will replace you. But at
Yeah.
the same time, you need to look out for your interests because you would have also seen enough in the news to know that
Yeah.
sharks, they can be sharks and they can
Of
kick you
course.
out when they feel like it, right?
Yeah.
So there are all of these opposing interests that we have to
Hmm.
balance and find a midway for.
Got it.
And of course, so that's your individual founder level issues. Then you have
Yeah.
company wide issues in the sense that investors are putting in money because they're looking to make a return on that
Yeah.
investment. So how do they do that? They need some guarantee from the company. So you will have some exit obligations on the company to
Hmm.
make sure that they give you that exit. And what are those terms for that exit? Will you give them an assured return? Does the law allow you to give an assured return? How do
Oh.
you, if it doesn't, how do you work around that? So
Correct. In
that sort
India,
of
are you
thing.
allowed to give an assured return? Probably not.
No, it's not. It's not.
Hmm.
It's not. But there are workarounds, and there are different
I
rules
see.
for non-residents and for residents. So
Oh.
there are just a workaround for everything.
If you know the law, you can find a way. I mean, not around it, but just
Yeah,
in the broad boundaries of the law.
yeah,
Question
yeah.
on early stage fundraising. What's the
Hmm.
most contentious clause, or what's the area where there is the most amount of back and forth at
Reverse
especially early
West.
stage?
Reverse
Reverse
West.
West.
If
What's
you,
a reverse
yeah, yeah.
West?
So, like you said, right? I like to wait around for 4 years. So what
Yeah.
happens at the end of the 4 years? Basically, you're vesting, your shares
Correct.
vest.
Yeah.
So again, going back to that same example, early stage means that your founder is the person who's running the show. You
Yeah.
need them to be around, and probably the customers you're attracting, the business you're building is very much that person's vision.
Yeah.
So if that person goes, your value of the company is likely going to tank, because the
Correct.
startup world is also very small, and it's now most of them are second time around founders who've
Yeah.
done this a few times, and they're able to raise money and get business by virtue of their names, right?
Yeah.
Also. But what that also means is that there is a very real need to protect that value in the company. So what we'll do is, say Reuben wants to start another company, and it's
Hmm.
a seed stage company or a Series A B company, which is early stage. So we're at that stage. It's been 3 years, and you hold, say, 50% of the shares, and the rest are some angel guys or some friends
Yeah.
and
This is the new
family.
company.
This is a new company. We're talking about
Okay.
early stage investing. So in that stage, when I come in as an investor, what I would tell my guys is that you need to tie in his shares. So if he holds 50%, let's tie in 80% of his shares to be vested, to be unvested, in the sense that he cannot deal, you can't sell those shares,
Hmm.
because that's what we're most worried about. The day you
Hmm.
take out most amount of money from the company, you're mentally checked out from that company,
Yeah.
right? So we don't want that situation. We want you to be invested and not really get all your money today. So a
Yeah.
lot of startup founders are not taking home a lot of money in the early
Hmm.
years, either salary or equity. Or if they have equity, they can't sell it. So you can't monetize on it. So we will
Ah.
make sure that you can't. And then we'll say that over the next 4 years, 20, 25% karke, those shares will vest.
Got
And
it.
if in the middle of that period there are different exigencies. One is, you'll say, cause events have happened. That is, you've really done something wrong, which
Hmm.
could be something as bad as embezzlement and fraud,
Hmm.
to something as you breaching some company policies.
Hmm.
Things that these especially foreign PE funds are most sensitive about, around
Yeah.
sexual harassment type of
Yeah.
issues, or some ethics issues. So those type of things, or just you disassociating from the company and just not turning up for work or doing whatever
Yeah.
because you probably started something on the side.
Yeah.
Those type of things, to no fault things, right? In the
Yeah.
sense that you just decide that I want to resign because the investors have started acting funny and they've got their
Yeah.
guy as a co-founder, and there's an ego clash. How do you deal with those type of things
Yeah.
in each of these situations? Or there is a situation unfortunate as death or
Yeah.
disability, then that's where the lawyer comes in to tell you how to deal with each of these things, in the sense that
Hmm.
for something that you've done, you've completely fucked up on, right? Like,
Correct.
you've committed fraud. In that sense,
Yeah.
in that situation, should you be given the benefit of just being able to walk away with all your shares? No, because
Hmm. So you claw back everything.
you claw back everything, and at what
Ah.
price? Because then you'd say, I want to do it at cost, I want to do it at the lowest
Hmm.
permissible price.
Wow.
Then the guy will say, then your argument to me would be, but hey, if I've committed fraud in my personal life, how does it affect the company? Then we go into
Correct.
another loop of discussion.
I see.
Then it's a waterfall, in the sense of, for the worst events, I will say, I'll claw back all your shares, you get nothing. For a
Hmm.
little less bad a situation, we will say, okay, I will buy your shares at whatever's the
Got it.
prevailing market price. For death, disability, we'll say we'll give it to your heirs, but they'll get it at lesser value. A part of it we'll get back because I need to find a new guy who's going to run the show,
Correct.
and I need to give him enough equity for it to be meaningful.
Hmm.
So reverse vest is, in summary, something that is often fought over, because it also becomes a little sensitive, because
Yeah.
you're having a very real conversation between the investor and the founder of what happens when that founder is no longer there.
Correct. Uh, yeah. When shit hits the ceiling.
Yes, and it has, right? In the
It
recent past, on
has
either side, like investors being a little too involved,
overreaching. Yeah.
overreaching. Two founders also maybe not, running the show as cleanly as
Yeah.
they sort of projected
Hmm.
it to be. There are enough examples out there for both sides to be a little jittery and
Yeah.
take aggressive views. So
Yeah.
early
I
stage,
mean, great time for lawyers. You guys are in big demand with all the
mm,
drama. unfolding. Let's talk a little bit about that. The last, I think, 2 3 years has been like crazy for the Indian like startup ecosystem. I think there was a big boom up till 21, 22. This is
Mm.
also, of course, global
Funding
macro
winter
boom, and
and
now it's
yeah.
all gone quiet. What are your 2 cents? How do you see the next 5 years of the Indian startup ecosystem? Is there money coming in? Is there going to
Yeah.
be like some sanity driven into these people who have been raising crazy
Yeah.
money? Every second person is getting accused for, there's a forensic investigation happening into this
Yeah.
company now.
Yeah.
Yeah, what are your 2 cents on it?
So there are a few things to it, right? One is there are economic realities which are beyond how companies are run in India or governance
Yeah,
issues in India. So that's a very real economic problem. But
yeah,
if you talk to or some people, they would say that it's exaggerated to a point that it's used as an excuse now to
get
get
better
more
deals.
value for, yeah, get better deals. But the fact is also that fundraising for the fund. So
Hmm.
for a VC to be able to get that fund, he has to raise the fund from external
Yeah,
investors, from their LPs. So that fundraising happens 5 7 years before they actually can start investing that money, and that's
yeah.
what is called a fund life.
Hmm.
So when that fundraising actually happens, they already have that money. It's just that they've not drawn down that money. So think of it
Yeah,
as a loan, but it's not really a loan. It's
correct.
you draw down that money when you actually need to put in that money. So they have all of what is called dry powder with them. So
Yeah,
they need to invest it because they have also obligations on getting certain returns to their
correct.
LPs. So they're just as incentivized to put in that money. And
Yeah.
each of these funds have certain goals. So for a large fund, there will be multiple funds in there which will say, okay, this is my Southeast Asia fund,
Hmm.
which will invest in healthcare. This is my Southeast Asia fund, which will invest in edtech. Or,
Yeah,
so they have very specific goals and they have to deploy that capital at some point.
yeah.
So even if we have some whatever is being discussed as a funding winter today, it's a matter of time where the money will find its way in.
Hmm.
And it has to. It's just that because of the market dynamics being the way they are, which is
Hmm.
stacked in favor of investors because we've seen very real examples of governance issues in India.
Yeah,
And also, of course, for them to be able to say that, okay, US interest rates are very high,
correct,
money is
correct.
much more expensive for us. So we're going to need a lot more protection for our money. So we're going to get
Yeah,
better deals. Either way, we're seeing that. And it is course correction also. I think you hinted at that because in India, like in a lot of startups, valuations were for the most part artificially inflated, or it was very difficult to justify those numbers because they were all based on projections.
yeah,
So, and on the basis of those projections, companies that had no operations were able to raise funds at a valuation of 500 million, right?
yeah.
Because of some projected value that you see in a few years down
Hmm.
the line. So some of that has calmed down,
Hmm.
and people are much less adventurous about going for these crazy valuations because it's all reached a tipping point now for a lot of companies. Like a lot of the companies which started as startups and scaled to the point of IPOing now, a lot of popular examples you'd see in India, a lot of
Yeah,
them didn't do as well in the open markets
correct.
because they couldn't justify the price band at which they were in the
Yeah, yeah,
market. Because when independent market analysts saw that company for what it was, they wrote down that investment to a large extent.
yeah,
So there was a flaw in the system, and there probably will be always at some point, and
yeah,
it's fine. And because it existed for a reason, it was not a flawed concept to begin with. It's just that we took it too far. So there
yeah.
is valuation adjustments happening, which is good. What we're seeing in the law is also interesting structures. If I'm getting too technical, you can
No,
tell me
no,
to
no.
stop.
This is interesting. To talk more about this. What
So
is interesting structure?
So interesting structures earlier you would just have a simple equity deal, right? Like you
Yeah,
put in your example, 10 million for 10%. And
yeah,
how you do it is you do a private placement rights issue in
correct.
India and you get those shares as equity. Now you're seeing different structures where you have bridge rounds, you have bridge
Hmm.
to bridge rounds. So how bridge round typically works is that it's a stopgap arrangement for the
Yeah,
company which is not doing too well and needs immediate cash, but there is no fixed valuation today because you're hoping that once you get that cash, and your business
Correct.
starts doing a little better, then in the next round, you will peg the previous round's price to the new round and
Got it.
bring
Got it.
that number up to that level. So
So,
you're
so bridge
seeing
rounds are usually done by existing investors at the
usually,
assumption is at the previous valuation. So no down, no up.
yes. Yeah, yeah. So
Got
there
it.
is like a floor and a pricing floor and a cap.
Yeah, yeah,
And then usually so you will take convertible instruments.
yeah,
And then for the next round, which you on the presumption of which you raise this bridge, because it's
yeah,
bridge, meaning that at the end of it there is
yeah,
another round, which you think you're confident is going to be a better round.
yeah.
Then your valuation for the previous round, the convertible instrument's
Got it.
price will adjust to that round.
Got it.
So it's
Do you see a
basically
lot of
telling some
companies? Do you see a lot of companies
now
doing
a
bridge
lot.
rounds?
A
A
lot
lot.
now because it's harder to raise money pure play today,
Yeah.
and a lot of them are having a tough time. Some
Hmm.
because certain business models were very COVID specific, so
Correct.
those may have flattened, or because generally certain plans have not worked out quite as well,
Hmm.
or generally there's not enough liquidity in the market. So a lot of them are not doing as well. So you're seeing that, but it's interesting because then as a lawyer I have to think very differently because I'm putting in a lot less money, but
Yeah.
because I know that the company is suffering, I can ask for a lot more in return.
Hmm. A lawyer
So
representing the investor.
in the investor, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
So which one do you like doing more? Do you like representing companies or do you like representing the investors more?
Uh, I think both. The political correct answer is both. Whoever gives me money, I
If
will
you had
work for
one
them.
more case, if you had one more case to take
Hmm.
on before the end of your career, your hypothetical end of your career, would you
Hmm.
take on an investor, a VC, a P, or a startup? Which among the three would you take on?
I think VC.
Hmm.
But there are different reasons for different answers. So if I want to
Okay.
challenge myself, it's the company because company guys are usually they're business guys. They don't
Yeah.
necessarily understand the law and how it on all of this fundraising process on the technical side how it works. So
Yeah.
you have to do a lot more hand holding, but it's far more rewarding when you're able to get that help that founder across the finishing line.
Yeah.
But it's a much harder process because you really have to sort of
They don't
sit with them
understand it
and
fully.
explain. Yeah, but they're much more appreciative also because when they're able to
Hmm.
see it, and because we see so many VCs, Ps on either side of the table, we can tell them, okay, you're dealing with this P, so these are the things that they really care about, or we worked with this guy in
Hmm.
the past and this is how they are, and you can deal with them in this way. Or strategize some commercial discussions for them that okay, we know we can give this up, but why don't you talk to them in this
Yeah.
way, tell them this doesn't work for me for this reason, but since you're saying it, I'm okay to do it, so why don't
Yeah.
you then drop something else? So helping them figure out some of that stuff because they're obviously brilliant guys, but this is
Yeah.
just not their forte. So we
Yeah.
help navigate that for them, and that's actually what an advisor is supposed to do, right? So, but as opposed to PVC guys who do this as a job, and a large part of them, the job is dealing with lawyers, so they are much more familiar with these concepts. They have
Hmm.
the benefit of all of the precedent in their system to know how to deal with certain issues. So they're obviously much more sophisticated as negotiating parties. So your work is simpler, but the quality of work expected in terms of what you bring to the table is not to explain the ABCs to them, but to have a much more
Hmm.
nuanced conversation with them. So
Got it.
that's more interesting in the sense that you can have a much more macro level discussion where you strategize and you
Hmm.
also learn a lot from them. So it's a
Got
completely
it.
different ball game.
So one is fulfilling, but not the most intellectually stimulating, and the other
Hmm.
one is like intellectually it'll push your limits, but
Hmm.
I mean the outcome is, I mean the people you do it for
They'll
don't
still
really
be fine.
appreciate.
They'll
Yeah,
still be fine
yeah.
if you were
Okay.
not there,
Correct.
kind of a
Correct.
thing.
Correct. Correct. Oh,
Yeah.
fascinating. You probably see a lot of negotiations. You're probably part of a lot of
Yes.
negotiations. How do you negotiate well, or how have you gotten better at negotiating?
So negotiating is my favorite part of
Is it?
of work. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Why do
It's
you like
great.
negotiating? Do you like the thrill of winning?
Yeah, that's really where you're able to argue out of a point with somebody, or somebody Vichara makes a mistake of saying one thing wrong, and then
Then you
you
pounce
just
on it.
wait to sort of turn it around. But you have to do it well. You can't like just be
Does that
yelling at
happen at
somebody.
home a lot
Uh,
between you and Harman?
yeah, he doesn't stand a chance, but he's good. He's in HR, so he's another level of he has his
Oh
own
my God.
yeah,
An HR and a lawyer. Wow, look
yeah.
at the combo.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
So both, yeah. I hate my HR at work, and he hates the legal team at his work. So,
I can
yeah,
imagine. So
yeah.
how do you usually get better? Like you wait for people to like trip, but
So
like when
you
you
have to,
practice,
yeah. It's being able to read people also, right? So it's the way you have regular conversations in the sense that you have to sort of be able to read the room when, lawyers act differently when their clients are on call. It's people want to seem a little tougher. You've worked with certain lawyers in the past, so you know their temperament. Some
mm,
guys, you know that you do that song and dance for the client and then call him up a couple of hours later and be like, yeah, just finish this, ye lete, ye chhodte, and then you're done.
mm,
Then
mm,
there are some guys who don't have that maturity because they may not have, for whatever reason, don't see it that way.
yeah,
Then it's harder. Then you need some interventions from your commercial guys. But overall, I think your arguments have to be solid, and
mm,
usually the fights are on. For us, for anybody, right, doing the same thing again and again, you eventually know that it's core 10, 12 issues that you're going to fight with.
yeah,
So on either side, you have your arguments ready,
mm,
and you just wait for somebody to say something a little stupid you can use against them. But you need to have your argument straight and play it well. So it's not to lay all your cards out on the table
yeah.
right at the get go, but walk somebody into a trap and then sort of be like, "अरे वो नहीं
My
said नहीं हो
God.
सकता."
Oh my God, it sounds
It's
so
fun.
like this. This is why you don't want to walk into a room with lawyers because you know it's like
It's so
this
much
is what's
fun.
waiting for you.
It's so much fun, especially when it's like a super old guy and then it's me on the other side. Anyway, his ego is bruised that he thinks, why does he have to talk to me? Why can't he
Oh
talk
my
to
God.
someone a little older? And then I do this, and that's a great day at the office. So that's
Have you
fun.
lost? I'm sure you've lost a few, but looking back when you sort of maybe a recent negotiation that did not go your way, do you remember one? And do you know why that did not go your way?
On very technical points, like, I was on the opposite side with a lawyer who was you have to be practical after a point. Like all points can be argued to death on either side,
Yeah,
but eventually it's a practical call that you have to take, whether it's a commercial practical call that you put to your clients,
yeah,
or you have to be like, okay, I know I'm right, but
yeah.
realistically, do I see this playing out as a real issue for me, for my client? No. So let's just move on and
Hmm.
try and wrap up issues that actually make a difference to
Yeah.
me. But a lot of people, or a lot of, I'm sure people have felt the same about me on the other side, but you come across people who don't see it that way.
Hmm.
And then it's just impossible to argue with somebody beyond a point.
Yeah.
They don't let you talk and they just keep yelling. And
Hmm.
yeah, you get a lot of those. So you just, sometimes you just get just really dumb people also, which is okay, which is fine. It's
Hmm.
That's
So
you don't
is
feel
it?
angry, but
Yeah.
the other times it gets you a little pissed off. But it's
So
okay.
is it fair to say like if two highly experienced lawyers are negotiating, the negotiation doesn't last too long? It's like this is
Exactly.
this. Let's just get it
Yeah.
done and just move on.
Yeah.
I
Yes.
see. I see. I
Yeah.
see.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's
If you
usually
don't need to
amateurs
do
which
that,
which which stretch it
yeah.
out much longer.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say, but though
Mm.
some people have that style, some very successful senior people have that style where they will badger you with information and arguments to the point that you just give up. That's also a
Yeah.
style that works for a lot of people.
Mm.
But that's a harder one to pull off without looking like the guy who's making it difficult for everyone.
Yeah.
Because it's also about the messaging you send to your client, right? Like, am I the guy who's trying to close things, or am I the
Yeah.
person who's trying to be difficult for difficult sake?
Yeah.
Because you're also charging the
Mm.
client by the hour, right? So if you talk longer,
Correct.
you're much more expensive for your client.
Wow. I won't say most of my time, but some time closing out like basically commercial contracts. And since I
Mm.
work with enterprises, you're usually there's a commercial guy negotiating with on the commercial
Mm.
stuff, and they have a legal person who has to fight everything on indemnity and which jurisdiction we're going to follow and all that rubbish. And then
Mm.
um, so yeah, I hate the
Yeah.
negotiation part. I'm like, why we like? But now when I usually go in, I usually tell at least my commercial counterpart that, see, we will close this agreement. There's no two ways about it. We will close
Yeah.
it, but we will dance around it for the next 3 4 weeks, and we got to do the song and dance because, well, I
Yeah.
think that's how these lawyers like it. We will dance, and then when we're tired of dancing, we will close it. But it will close. I
Yeah.
guarantee you that.
Just
Um,
waiting for the first guy to blink. That's it.
yeah, it's waiting for the first guy to drop that sweat.
Yeah.
Apart from negotiation, what do you like most about your job?
Yeah, I think just seeing that life cycle through having done this for a few years now, I think just seen some startups as absolute startups and now
Yeah.
Series E, D stage. So you see
Wow.
the maturity of the guys there and you see the blueprint you helped set up hold true and it works out and it continues to work
Yeah.
over time. So that's been fun. And then I've seen, investment philosophies or growth philosophies within a company also shift. Because of things like this funding winter and stuff, right? Like people
Yeah.
are not able to, some companies which are ready for IPO in the next 2 years, they're not able to raise more money, but they need to grow their valuation. So then they do like artificial growth in the sense that they will uh, start doing some
Acquire or something.
acquisitions and stuff. So then you see a completely different side to them. And then again,
Mm.
you're starting with them from scratch because their investment teams are internal teams are not geared to understand how acquisitions work because it's a completely different ball game than
Yeah.
fundraising. So helping
Correct.
them through that is a different process altogether. And so seeing that life cycle, and I think
Mm.
I've seen a very tumultuous period. Like you said, beginning was very
Yeah.
fresh and everything. Everyone was having a good day and everyone was raising money and it was all straightforward and nobody was asking too many questions to now too many questions to now the dust sort of
Yeah.
settling and new structures, new ways of growing,
Mm.
negotiation strategies changing because everyone's power dynamic is changing.
Yeah.
So all of that is to be able to now understand enough of this to be able to have like a bird's eye view of okay, acha ye chal raha hai in the background. That
Mm.
makes the job a lot more interesting as opposed to just trying to understand what the words mean on the paper, which was the
Yeah.
first few years.
Yeah. For people interested, if you're keen on this topic, especially around fundraising, there's this great book. I don't know if you've read it called Sand something Sandhill Road. Uh,
Okay.
what's it called? Let me. It was written by one of the Secrets of Sandhill Road.
Acha, okay.
Uh, yes, it's called Secrets of Sandhill Road: Venture Capital and How to Get It. It was written by this
Hmm.
guy called Scott Kapoor, who's the lead. I think somebody big on the legal team at A16G, which is a pretty famous and popular,
Hmm.
or like a big investment
Yeah.
VC. And he talks a lot about how fundraising happens, and it's not about just the deal, but it's not about what is happening macro. Where is the fund cycle in? Is it the start of the fund cycle? Is it the end of the fund
Hmm.
cycle? Um, and yeah, it's much more than just what company you're doing and what your ideas and what valuation you're
Hmm.
seeking. It's There's so many other things which are happening in the background. What are multiples in public markets, and then how does that
Hmm.
translate to private markets? It is quite a fascinating read. So
Yeah.
okay, so that's what you like. What do you like least about your job?
I think the hours sometimes, and there is still a little bit
Hmm.
of like that. So all of this is a fun part of the law. Then
Yeah.
we have some hierarchy within the firm where
Hmm.
the kids unfortunately have to do a lot more of the procedural work, which at the back
Hmm.
end they need to manage. So if your team is lean, because attrition is a big problem in law firms.
Oh,
So people,
really?
yeah, it's a
Why
because
is that?
I think long hours and
But if
generally
long
the
hours are
market is very,
everywhere.
yeah, long hours are everywhere, but everyone's hoping that we'll be a little better somewhere else.
Okay.
And generally, most law firms can be quite toxic. So,
Oh.
because of long hours, very demanding work, there's a lot of money to be made if you just do a lot of volume. So a lot
Hmm.
of firms work on that philosophy. So finding the right kind of firm is a big one. A lot of people burn out in the early years,
I see.
because it's tough in the first few years. So if your firm is going through a little bit of a lean period where people are in and out, then I will still have to do a lot of the kind of work I don't want to be doing basically. But that
Yeah.
happens from time to time. But that's about it. I think overall I'm really enjoying it now. I'm at a stage where I'm stepping into more of the admin kind of firm management kind of stuff as well.
Hmm.
So that understanding the business of running a law firm is a whole other thing. But
Hmm.
that's fun. Yeah.
Do you think you'll start your own practice at some point?
No, man, it's too much work. Because it's a lot of work, and you don't end up actually doing what you do. I don't know, I've heard this a lot from founders, where they were, they were running some trading app or something, and they were like, at this fundraising process, I have not been able to trade. I don't know. This is not my work. Why am I doing this? So, when you start running a business, then
Yeah.
it becomes about the business as opposed to the actual core business of the business, but just the running of
Yeah.
operations. While, of course, still being at the helm of the
Correct.
actual client facing stuff, that can be quite tough. But never say never. I don't know, maybe.
Mm.
But it's quite tough, and it takes a good 10-15 years to really establish yourself and do the kind of work to
Mm.
be able to get the kind of work you want to do. Because
Yeah.
work can be very different. It can be like those very basic commercial contracts, like the kinds you would otherwise do
Yeah.
internally, like you were talking about, right? Where for me, it's not an exciting proposition because I
Correct.
know ye pache cheezein, and mostly it's commercial stuff. So there's not much room for a lawyer to do anything other
Yeah.
than do some drama to just get some money out of it. It's boring work for me
Yeah.
personally. So if I want to do fundraising, I have to be large enough for these funds to recognize
Yeah.
me. So it'll take some time to get that name, and a lot of business development. It can be
Mm.
quite painful. But yeah,
I
but
see.
before that, I wanted to ask you about what is so you're in startups in Singapore and before that
Yes.
Jakarta. Were you
Yes.
part of any fundraising process? What's the ecosystem like,
Mm.
and how's it going?
Um, in Jakarta, I wouldn't say I was on the exact fundraising team, but I would work very closely with the team who would fundraise, because like everybody needs data on everything, right? So
Hmm.
it is about like the operational teams will sort of sit down and do, I think, two things. Number one, put together data in a format which is answering key questions.
Hmm.
So apart from projections, but like cohorts and things like that. So I spent a lot of time doing that, and also just like explaining or like trying to add some qualitative like color on top of the numbers on, hey, this is what the business is, right? So I've been in sort of part of those conversations with investors or potential investors, of just trying to explain, okay, these are the numbers, but here's what really happens in the business. So that's sort of my lens of it. I do work with a lot of like people who are in VC, and not less of PE, but more on the VC side. Overall, I think Southeast Asia and Singapore, I think a very exciting market. I think it's in a lot of ways it's like 5-7 years behind India,
Hmm.
especially like markets like Indonesia.
Yeah.
But I think one challenge we are going through right now is there were two sort of public IPOs. One was for Grab and one was for Gojek and Tokopedia, which
Hmm.
is the Uber Flipkart equivalent in Indonesia. They have
Hmm.
not been performing too well in public markets. So
Hmm.
that of course translates to all private markets. People like, oh, we've been playing the Southeast Asia bet for about 10 years now. Nothing really has come out. I think India also had some of that commentary, with the
Yeah.
first wave of
Yeah.
Zomatos and Flipkarts, going public, they didn't do really well. So I think my hope is that despite this, the India narrative is still being positive because,
Yeah.
whereas when you put in money in the world today, the US, Europe, I don't think so, right?
Hmm.
So that's where it is. It's not as sophisticated, it's not as advanced as what I see in India, to be honest. I think it's still, 5, 6 years lagging, but
Hmm.
I do see a lot of signs. What I see in Indonesia, Philippines, Singapore
Yeah.
today reminds me a lot of what, when we were starting Nivasa, wherein
Yeah.
the only big company names were, Flipkart, Zomato, Mintra. That was it. Like maybe like
Yeah.
Taxi for sure.
Yeah.
The ecosystem wasn't as rich. India now is very rich. People are doing all kinds
Yeah.
of companies. Indonesia, Philippines, I think are getting there. I think in the next 3 or 4 years,
And then
it would happen.
that's the perfect time to be there, right? Like, wouldn't
It's
you,
perfect
as a
time.
founder, have loved to have stuck around when
Yeah,
Paytm
absolutely.
was coming about and to have been part of that wave, right? So
Yeah,
that's a
exactly.
great
So
time to be there.
that's one reason I'm quite excited to
Hmm.
sort of be here. Of course, in parallel, there is a massive FOMO of being like, oh my god, look at how exciting Bangalore seems now. And yeah, even when we were winding down Nivasa, this was 2018. It still felt at that point to us like, okay, maybe the startup is a very niche thing, right? Not many people do it. And just like a
And
year or
now,
2 years later, it's
yeah.
like, my god, like it's fantastic.
But it seemed like a great proposition, yeah, because there's still nobody who does that as an
Yeah,
organized thing, and
yeah,
even now, right? There is no broker, or just helps you get brokers, I think
correct.
houses, but you don't have property managers who do it
Yeah,
professionally.
yeah. I still think that it is a problem to be solved.
Hmm.
I think yeah, a few things. I think India, at a macro and residential real estate, the problem exists wherein rental yields are very low. I think
Hmm.
India rental yields are probably the lowest in the world. That means there's this
Really?
weird setup wherein, even if, for example, the house you guys stay in, I don't know if you'll stay on rent or you'll own it, but my guess would be is mortgage is at least two times rent. That
Yeah.
means why the hell would anybody buy a house?
Hmm. Correct.
You just rent it.
Hmm.
The flip of that is that if my rents are so low, as a property owner, I don't give a shit if my house is empty or it's badly
Hmm.
maintained or if
Hmm.
it's on rent. If it's on rent, okay, great. Sometimes I'm still living with this PTSD that somebody's going to sit in my house and I can't throw them out.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the real money I want to make is just appreciation after 5 years. So all of that put together makes the real estate market, at least in India, very weird. It's not very renter
Hmm.
friendly.
Hmm.
Um, but which I still think it's a problem to be solved. People find it very hard to find rental places to live. House
Yeah.
ownership is getting harder and harder. I think people are pushing house ownership later and later.
Yeah.
Rather than buying a house, I just maybe put in money into, I don't know, like the stock market, earn 12%, and then when I'm
Hmm.
40 and I want to retire, or when I know I want to live here long term, I'll buy a house.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a lot of
So
people. But there's the
yeah,
advantage of volume in India, right? And real estate
yes,
has always traditionally been the one core investment
correct,
that one must, like that old world
yeah,
wisdom. And a lot of people still do it. So there is,
yeah,
and in India, any business that, I mean, you just have, it's a function of volume. And
correct,
for pretty much any idea that you have, there will be enough people for you to
yeah,
have some
exactly.
version of a market. So there could
So
still be some
yeah,
potential.
absolutely. I think there's it's a big opportunity. If somebody listening to this is deciding to start it, I can really tell you all the things that can go wrong, and what you should not do. But yes, I still believe it's a great business to be built. In fact, the WeWork founder now, Adam Newman, is his new
Yes.
company which he's trying to build. Flow is basically rethinking residential
Yes.
real estate.
Yeah.
Because even at a more fundamental level, right, there is something like, I don't know if you feel it, but the fact that you live in a building, at least like in apartments, you live in a building and you don't know your neighbor,
Hmm.
I find it quite jarring that we've
Yeah.
come to a society wherein we all live in the same house. That means 50% of our life, at least when we sleep or we're at home, is the same. Like we
Hmm.
live in that same space, right? We're all affected by the same things, and we don't even know who you are.
Yeah.
I think that's
And it's
that's that's
odd
bad.
to know who your neighbors are, right?
Yeah,
It's a strange thing.
we go in the lift and you will not even say hi. I'm like,
Yeah.
how have we reached this point, right? I still do not say hi to my neighbors, but I do think, like, I think the way we live, I think will change significantly. I think,
Hmm.
I don't know what it looks like, but those were some of the things Nivasa wanted to do. I think the
Hmm.
residential real estate was one thing, but the fact that there's this entire cohort of people who move to Gurgaon every year. All of them go through the same problems. You don't know anybody in the city. You're trying to find a maid. You're trying to
Hmm.
set up your house. Um, you're trying to find people who are like you in the city.
Hmm.
Um, and it's only going to increase, right, as more and more people migrate to bigger cities, as there are more cities. So yeah, anyway,
Yeah.
when we were starting Nivasa back in 2015, 16, all of this was part of the plan. But yeah, we were over ambitious on how fast we could get to the plan. Maybe it was like a 30-year plan. We wanted to get done in three, and that was not good. um, okay, I know we are almost up on time, but looking back, Atikant, two pieces of advice you would have for 19-year-old you.
19-year-old me. I think uh, I think one advice would be don't date somebody for so long while you're in college.
Okay, you might end up getting married to them.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. You have so many years to do that, and instead just play the field for a little while longer, enjoy.
Hmm.
Because, yeah, like, as in, it was a great time, and Harman and I talk about this quite often that we, as in, that's not the age to be so serious about who you love.
Hmm.
So it's focus on other things and just don't take everything so seriously. I was
Hmm.
very tightly wound up generally in life, so I think just easing out a little bit and being a little more open to experiences. In my earlier
Hmm.
years, I think that happened very rapidly, very fast after that.
I see.
But in the early years, I think it was either, you feel a little self-conscious because you're in a new city and you don't understand a
Hmm.
lot of what's going on, and that's a self-preservation thing or whatever it was. I think
Yeah.
just being open to new things, new
Mm.
people, and not be so quick to judge and dismiss things and experiences. I think I would say that just to give myself some assurance to say it'll all work out. It's okay.
Mm.
You can just chill and have some fun. It's fine. I think I may have been able to take a little bit more out of college if I had done
Mm.
that. Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
So that is one. Do you have any other a second piece of advice?
And then I think I do have some regrets from college in the sense that I had a lot of other interests, but I was a little too shy to explore them. Like I enjoyed debating in school. Then I came to college and I realized,
Mm.
okay, debating is like a very serious thing. It's not
Yeah.
Patna debating where it's mobile phones are bad for you, pro versus con debate, like it's parliamentary debating and all these things that
Correct.
I did not even know existed when I was
Oh,
there
same.
growing up. So immediate so one the systemic response can either be, okay, I'm curious and I want to know what this is about and I want to try and I'm not afraid to try, or
Yeah.
you are like, okay, I'm too afraid to put myself
Yeah.
out there, so I'd rather just focus on something else that I think will come a little easier to me. I think
Yeah.
I chose the latter, where to just go for things that I thought were easier to achieve in terms of extracurriculars and things like
Yeah.
that. So I think that was more just a shy kid
Mm.
who felt that they couldn't do it. So I would tell them there's no guarantee I would have been any good, but at least I wouldn't have had that little bit of a regret that why didn't I try.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would just want to. I think some of those type of things.
Got it. Yeah, I
Mm.
do vividly remember. I think the first 3 months of college, seeing what debating in college meant was such a big shock to me because I had done some debates when I was in school, but
Hmm.
you had the motion 2 3 week 4 weeks in advance, and you would write a speech and you would prepare and you would just come
Yeah.
deliver and go back, and then
Yeah.
somebody would judge you. And
Yeah.
then in college, you're like, oh, you get the topic like 1 hour before, like what the fuck, and then I then realized that you also draw if you're going to support or you're going to be against it. Like you're going to be for the motion, against the motion. I'm like,
Hmm.
how can you just decide based on like what do you pick up if you would be for or against it? Like you have to have a belief, right? How can you believe one thing and like debate the opposite?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think over time I realized that it's just a sport. It's like when you
Yeah.
pick a side on football, you either do this side on that side. Maybe it's just something like that, which is I guess the whole scale of debating.
Yeah.
Okay, last question before we wrap up. Over the last 10 years, have you had any shift in belief? And by shift in belief, I mean something you believed very strongly when you were maybe 18, 19, and you've taken like a 180-degree shift in that belief.
I think I used to. It's just a general thing. I don't think it's a very specific belief, but I was generally a very judgmental person.
Mm,
Again, I think it came more from fear of the unknown as opposed to
mm,
genuinely thinking there was a reason to be a certain way. But I was very like a sort of no to everything pretty much, and I
mm,
was very set in my ways and not interested in listening much to anybody else. I think that has changed over time, and I've become, I hope, a lot more tolerant of people generally and just easing out in life.
yeah.
That has happened for sure, and that's really helped me sort of manage
Mm,
some unnecessary anxieties.
mm,
But yeah, I think that just those kind of things just work itself out with age and with time. I think you see enough to know that if you start judging or thinking, you're just wasting too much energy that you could just spend on
mm,
yourself instead.
mm,
But yeah, simple one. Otherwise, yeah, I think core beliefs have been the same. Thankfully, my core beliefs are not very messed up, so I think
mm.
it's still okay.
Just like the Constitution.
Yes, I was just gonna say that. I thought, nahi, nahi, yaar, it's the nerdy callbacks I can avoid.
As we wrap up, do you after all the questions I've done for you, do you have you get to ask me one question? You already asked me a question, but I'll let you
Yes.
ask me another question. What do you have for
Yeah,
me?
yeah. So what has your been like? Do you wish you'd done something while you were in college, or done something a little differently in college that you didn't do?
Hmm. I think similar to what you said. I think back in college, uh, I while I think it was a great time and I think I did a lot. Um, Maybe just be a bit more like, yeah, just explore and experience more things.
Hmm.
I think for, and of course there is no limit to how much you could do like, I don't know, I don't even know how you define that limit. But now when you sort of look back and you're like, oh, why were you so scared from trying that, or why were you so scared of like, what's
Yeah.
the worst that would have happened? Like, not
Yeah.
much, right? Like you could have gone spoken to so many more people. Like, there were just like
Yeah.
some people you just did not speak to. Like, why? Like,
Yeah.
you
It
lived with
was
them
the
for like 3
oddest
years.
thing. I don't know if you felt that way, but like you know the person who's walking
Yeah,
towards you. You see
correct.
them, but you will just pretend like I'm not gonna say hi because of some stupid reason. It's the stupidest thing, and it was such a small place. But sorry, I
Yeah,
interrupted.
exactly. Just those things. Like, I think there were so many different people who you would see every day. How hard would it just be to be like, okay, like, let me go say hi, and I
Yeah.
don't know, like, we might just learn something. But again, I think this is all to the on the caveat that I did make like great friends through
Mm.
university. We did sort of explore and understand ourselves, grow as individuals. But yeah, I think there was this. Judging is a good word. A bit judgy
Yeah.
coming in. It's just like, oh, maybe I'll stay away from that. What for
Yeah.
what? Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so I would
Maybe
say
it's
maybe
an
that is
age
one thing.
thing.
I
Maybe it's
think
an
it's an
age
age thing.
thing.
I think it's an
Yeah.
age thing.
It's all, I think, whatever's playing up inside you, you just project that as, okay, I'm too afraid to do this, so I'm just going to say that this thing is not
Correct.
good and I'm good and this is fine. And
Yeah.
maybe that's some version of it, but yeah.
I mean, look at all the self awareness we have developed in the last 10 years.
Yes, correct. I think we're going to
Okay.
have another one in 10 years and we're going to be like, that 32-year-old did not know what the fuck she was talking
You know what? I'm pretty sure.
about.
Before I started season 2 of this podcast, I wanted to start it, but I did a few conversations and stopped. But I started interviewing 40-year-olds or people who had just crossed the 40-year-old mark about their 30s and what
Hmm.
advice they would have for the 30-year-old self.
Nice. Huh.
Um, and surprisingly, the one thing which came up, I did only 3 conversations, and I got bored, to be honest. Because yeah, anyway, whatever. But one thing which came up quite consistently is it's still very early to take risks. Most
I
40
think
year
30.
olds,
Yeah.
yeah, most 40-year-olds said that when we were 30, we did not take enough risks. We wish we had taken more
Yeah, yeah,
risks
yeah.
because it's still very early to take risks.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
sometimes catch myself being like, yeah, like, you're doing something and you imagine like, okay, this is probably what I'm going to do, or this is the broad area I'm going to be for the rest of my life.
Mm.
And maybe the reality is that, if you want to do a
It's not.
180-degree shift on what you're doing now,
Mm.
it is still possible.
Yeah,
You can take that risk.
yeah, yeah. It is. I do.
So,
Yeah.
that is what 40-year-olds will have to say
Mm.
about 30, and maybe
Makes a
we'll
lot of
probably say the
sense.
same about it
Yeah,
10 years later.
yeah.
Anyway,
Okay.
thank you so much for making time. Atikant, if people have to follow and keep up with all the stuff you're doing, how's the best way that they should get in touch or just follow you? Is it
Just
Instagram, LinkedIn?
Instagram, LinkedIn. That's it. Yeah. No.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
those two.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll put those in the show notes so you can find the link. And
Great.
yeah, I think with that we shall wrap this one up. I will
This is so much
stop
fun,
recording.
Reuben. I really
It
enjoyed
is,
it.
yeah. I know
Yes.
we went on a bit longer than we had planned,
Acha.
but
Okay.
it for me is okay as long